The ongoing crisis in Syria has sparked significant opposing opinions. Former President Bashar al Assad and his family have fled for their safety. But does fleeing truly address the justice the people of Syria are demanding? In a sudden turn of events, the First Lady of Syria has experienced an unexpected transformation that has left Bashar al Assad in tears. What is this transformation, and why did it spark such an emotional reaction? Does this also lead to the definitive end of the Assad family's rule? Join us in this video to find out. The unexpected transformation of Syria's First Lady Asma al Assad. The dramatic transformation of Asma al Assad, once celebrated as an English rose in the desert, into an international outcast, has drawn renewed media attention following the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria. A glowing profile of Bashar Assad's wife, published in Vogue in March 2011, just weeks before the Arab Spring erupted and subsequently deleted, exemplifies the dramatic fall in her reputation, according to the Daily Mail. The piece, part of Vogue's Power issue, depicted the London-born computer science graduate as someone on a mission to establish a beacon of culture and secularism in the Middle East. The first impression of Asma Assad is that of a movement, a purposeful streak through space with a flash of red souls, the article stated. It described her as a slim, long-limbed beauty with a sharp analytical mind who dresses with calculated simplicity, and suggested she envisioned Syria's youth leading modernization by becoming active citizens. However, shortly after the profile's publication, Asma and her husband became symbols of the brutal crackdown on widespread protests, which escalated into Syria's 13-year civil war, resulting in over 600,000 deaths and the displacement of millions. Amid the onset of the civil war, Asma al Assad sought legal counsel from the London-based firm Carter Ruck. Media outlets covering the family's affairs received legal threats, but such efforts could not shield her or Bashar al Assad from being branded international pariahs after the regime's forces launched multiple chemical attacks on civilians. Vogue removed the Rose in the Desert profile following a WikiLeaks email leak revealing that she had spent $318,000 on luxury furniture during the first year of the war. Meanwhile, U.S. estimates pegged the Assad family's fortune at $2 billion. Asma al Assad was one of Syria's most infamous war profiteer and was subject to U.S. sanctions in 2020. The rapid change in his wife's public image and his own collapse seemed to have shocked Bashar al Assad, who was also toppled earlier this month, bringing him to tears. Since his family had dominated Syria for more than 50 years and their hold on power appeared to be unbreakable, a defeat of this size was unexpected. One crucial point needs to be answered before exploring the al-Assad family's decades-long domination in Syria. How did Asma al-Assad become entangled in this entire political turmoil? Keep watching as we unveil the details. The life of Asma al Assad, before becoming the First Lady of Hell. Asma al Assad played a crucial role in forming the state and its public perception. She was much more than merely the president's spouse. She came to represent both awe and controversy. She was formerly hailed by the media as Syria's Lady Diana and the Rose of the Desert, but these laudatory titles changed after the regime's crimes were made public, leading to her being referred to as Lady Macbeth and the First Lady of Hell. She was raised far from the disorder of the Middle East, having been born Asma Fawaz Okras. Her family skillfully blended Syrian customs with a contemporary Western way of life while she was growing up in Acton, a bustling neighborhood in West London. Her mother, Sahar Okras, was a diplomat in the Syrian embassy in London, and her father, Dr. Fawaz Okras, was a renowned cardiologist. The family appeared to be completely integrated into British society, despite their close ties to Syria. Asma's academic path mirrored the high goals of her family. She was a particularly brilliant and motivated student at Queen's College, a prestigious institution in Marylebone. Her hard work paid off in 1996 when she received first-class honours from King's College London in both French literature and computer science. Asma started working in the demanding industry of investment banking after finishing her education. After starting her career at Deutsche Bank, she transferred to J.P. Morgan, where she immediately made a name for herself. She was known to her friends and co-workers at this time as Emma, a name that represented her easy blend into British society. She was more interested in her job and the Western way of life than in West Asian politics or culture, according to a family acquaintance who once remarked about her Englishness. In her early years, Asma was portrayed as a young woman with a bright career in banking who seemed unaware of the complicated realities of her Syrian ancestry. When Asma's mother, Sahar, allegedly urged her to get back in touch with Bashar al Assad, a young ophthalmology student living in London in the late 1990s, Asma's life took an unexpected turn. Through shared family friends in Syria, the two had known each other since they were little. Bashar had gone to London in 1992 to train as an eye doctor, living a peaceful life away from Syria's political unrest. Asma's work in investment banking was flourishing at the time, and she appeared to be headed for a bright future. But she couldn't help but be pulled to this quiet but ambitious man. Although they first met on family vacations in Syria, their relationship deepened in London. At the time, Bashar didn't look like the person who would become president. He was quiet, focused on his medical studies, and appeared less interested in his father's political background and more in his passion for ophthalmology. Meanwhile, Asma was at a turning point in her life. Her path was radically changed by her growing connection with Bashar, who now had a successful profession at J.P. Morgan and aspired to attend Harvard for an MBA. Just 1 month before their wedding in 2000, she abruptly decided to leave her job at J.P. Morgan. Her co-workers were taken aback by the timing of her resignation, particularly because it happened just 2 months before she was scheduled to receive a sizable bonus and soon after she had clinched a big deal. The wedding of Asma and Bashar al Assad in December 2000 came as a surprise to many. Unlike most high-profile unions, theirs was conducted in complete secrecy, with no prior public hints about their relationship. For both Syrians and international observers, the news seemed to emerge out of nowhere. This surprising union aroused a lot of rumors. For others, it was a symbolic act of reform and modernization. Asma, a Sunni Muslim raised in a Western environment, and Bashar, an Alawite, seemed to represent a unique bond and the aspiration for a Syria that was more inclusive and forward-thinking. Their union was seen by many as a potential growth for the country, a sign of hopes for a more promising and optimistic future. Little did they know that Bashar al Assad would become president one day. So how did this eventually happen? Keep watching as we trace it back to how the al-Assad family dominated Syria for 50 years. The ascension and regime of former President Bashar al Assad. Hafez al Assad, Bashar's father, seized the chance to take over in November 1970 and masterminded a coup that thrust him into the White House. He quickly consolidated his power after 25 years of political turmoil. He started assigning members of the Alawite sect to important positions of authority and enacted strict measures to quell opposition. Simultaneously, he worked to enhance Syria's influence within the broader Arab world. Alongside becoming a major adversary of both the United States and Israel, he also increasingly advocated for Palestinian issues, which led to the United States officially labeling Syria as a state sponsor of terrorism. Additionally, Syria formed close links with revolutionary Iran, supporting Tehran's efforts to help organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah, and sent troops to Lebanon to fight in its civil war. But in 1994, things took a surprising turn when Basil, Bashar's older brother, who had been raised to be their father's successor, died in a vehicle accident. Bashar was suddenly thrust into the role of heir apparent, one for which he had neither planned nor expected to be ready. Bashar left the relative calm of his life in London and his dreams of becoming a doctor to return to Syria. His father swiftly enrolled him in an accelerated military program, where he rapidly ascended the ranks, advancing from captain to colonel in just 3 years. By the time Hafez al-Assad passed away in June 2000, Bashar was prepared to take on the mantle of power. He carried on the Assad family legacy by winning the presidency with 97% of the vote after a fiercely contested election. Expectations that the youthful Assad would transform Syria, however, turned out to be too hopeful. He continued the nation's strong anti-Israel and anti-US stance, while also maintaining his father's solid control on the country. However, with the start of the Arab Spring in 2011, the Assad's 40 years of power faced their first serious and protracted challenges. As resistance to long-standing regimes intensified throughout the Middle East, leading to the toppling of Egypt's Mubarak government, demonstrations also broke out in Syria. Despite widespread calls for moderation from both international and regional entities, Assad responded with a brutal crackdown. Rather than suppressing the revolt, opposition movements gained strength. By 2012, Syria had descended into a full-scale civil war. Bashar al Assad's regime faced significant challenges despite his family's firm grip on Syria. But what ultimately led to the downfall of the al-Assad family's dominance? Stay tuned to find out. The great defeat of former President Bashar al Assad. The anti-Assad forces seemed to be winning the battle in the early going. As Tehran continued to back its long-standing partner, many other countries started to turn against Assad, acknowledging the opposition organizations as the rightful representatives of the Syrian people. Despite appeals for direct help, the United States initially resisted increasing its involvement, even when facts regarding the regime's use of chemical weapons came to light. As a result, things were beginning to change in Assad's favor by 2015. The Syrian army started to retake land in the southern part of the nation with the help of Russia and Iran, who provided vital air support and ground forces, including Hezbollah militants from nearby Lebanon. From there, their advances moved northward. At the same time, Western focus became increasingly directed towards the rising danger posed by various radical Islamist factions, such as Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, which had established a presence in the eastern regions of Syria. These changes led to the Assad regime regaining control of about 70% of the country by 2020. It appeared like Assad had finally won the war, even though the Kurds had created an independent entity in much of the northeast and opposition forces still controlled areas in the northwest close to the Turkish border. Consequently, he gradually and steadily began to be reintegrated into the Arab world. Although it may have appeared that the opposition forces were nearly vanquished, they were, in reality, waiting for the right moment. Seizing the chance to strengthen their hold on the northwest, they concentrated on recruiting additional fighters, enhancing their equipment, refining their training, and developing drone capabilities. The rebels saw a chance to launch an attack as Russia became more preoccupied with the fight in Ukraine, and Tehran's ground support was reduced due to Israel's recent war with Hezbollah in Lebanon. With the help of Turkish-backed forces led by the Islamist group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, which was once a branch group of al-Qaeda, the rebels quickly took control of key cities like Aleppo, Homs, and Hama. They moved southwest from these strongholds in the direction of Damascus, the capital. As opposition parties poured into Damascus on December 8, 2024, Syrian President Bashar al Assad fled the capital. A regime that had ruled Syria for more than 50 years came to an end as a result of this incident. With the Assad family facing defeat at the hands of the rebels, what lies ahead for Bashar al-Assad and his family? Let's explore their possible fate. The betrayal and escape of Bashar al-Assad and his family. Remaining in the Middle East, as rebel forces surged into Syria's capital, the streets of Damascus grew hauntingly quiet. President Bashar al-Assad, whose family had ruled Syria for 50 years, had disappeared. His military commanders were left in disarray just hours before he secretly escaped to Moscow. The rebel forces, having taken control of Aleppo, Homs, and Hama, were rapidly advancing. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, once a symbol of unrelenting power, had vanished, and his abrupt departure shattered the remnants of Syria's crumbling regime. However, his escape was far from simple. His final days were steeped in secrecy, and his fractured, desperate government clung to Assad's false assurances. On November 28, Assad reassured his commanders in Damascus that Russian military aid was on its way. Even as the rebels closed in, he urged his forces to hold their ground. Yet deep down, he knew the truth. Moscow had already declined to intervene. Assad's departure as head of state was his personal decision, with officials remaining tight-lipped about the situation. By Saturday, December 7th, chaos engulfed the capital. Government officials scrambled to prepare a speech for Assad. His media advisor, Buthaina Shaban, arrived at the presidential residence that evening to draft it, but was shocked to find the place eerily silent and deserted. Earlier that day, his government learned their leader had quietly fled the country. His destination, Moscow, was cloaked in secrecy. Vladimir Putin orchestrated Assad's exile with meticulous precision. The plan, concealed from public scrutiny, involved a Russian intelligence-arranged flight with its transponder disabled to evade detection. Even Assad's younger brother, Bashar al Assad, commander of the elite 4th Armored Division, was unaware of the plan. Assad's cousins, Iyad and Ihab Moklauf, were similarly caught off guard. After the former president's sudden escape, they fled Damascus by car but were ambushed on their way to Lebanon. Ihab was murdered, while he had sustained injuries. Back at the presidential palace, confusion spiraled into panic. Assad's office manager and numerous aides, who believed he was merely returning home, were left in shock, unaware that no further orders would ever come. By 2 a.m., the regime had unraveled. Soldiers abandoned their positions, the government lost hope, and the city fell into the hands of the rebel forces led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. The group, spearheading the charge, sought to comfort the war-weary residents of Damascus. Victory and the liberation of the land, they declared, are not merely about breaking chains or raising flags. They symbolize the birth of a nation, the restoration of dignity, and the rewriting of history. Bashar al Assad and his family's escape was a dramatic ordeal, facilitated by secret underground tunnels and the assistance of allies and foreign nations. Throughout all these years, one constant figure remained steadfast by Bashar's side: his wife, Asma al-Assad. She was far more than just the mother of his 3 children. With Bashar al-Assad and his family now exiled in Moscow under granted asylum, the question remains: what does the future hold for them? Stay tuned to uncover more. What lies ahead for Bashar al-Assad and his family? Asma al-Assad, the wife of Bashar al-Assad, has been fighting a serious case of leukemia for a number of years, and her health is becoming worse. This raised concerns about her involvement with the dictatorship and her capacity to persuade her husband to put an end to the bloodshed that was still going on in 2012. Asma was publicly urged to speak out against the abuse by the wives of the German and British ambassadors to the UN. In their video message, they asked her to take a stand and openly demand an end to the bloodshed, saying, "Take a risk and stop the murders now." Asma remained mute despite their reminders that she could no longer hide behind her husband. Her support for the regime's activities became clear over time. According to experts, Asma grew more and more satisfied with the advantages and authority that came with her job. According to analysts, any moral concerns about the regime's crimes were eclipsed by the couple's strong loyalty to their position of authority. When leaked emails from Asma and Bashar's private accounts were revealed by The Guardian in 2012, all remaining skepticism regarding her role was eliminated. According to these emails, Asma was spending a lot of money on luxury items like pricey jewelry, designer clothes, and also very expensive home decor while Syrians were suffering from famine and displacement. The suffering of the Syrian people stood in stark contrast to their opulent way of life. The emails also demonstrated Asma and Bashar's tight friendship. One of her messages to her husband said, "If we are strong together, we will overcome this together. I love you." Public indignation was heightened by the widespread dissemination of these private letters throughout Syria. Images of Syria's elite, including those connected to the Assads, attending extravagant parties while common Syrians were fighting to survive the civil conflict surfaced on social media at the same time. However, since then, Asma al-Assad stepped away from her official duties to concentrate on her treatment after receiving a diagnosis of acute myeloid leukemia, which the Syrian president announced in May 2024. The timeliness of these health announcements has been questioned by some. Despite calls for accountability for Bashar and Asma and their children, Russia, a longtime friend of the Syrian regime, has refused to turn them over to the International Criminal Court. Moscow has essentially turned into their haven, providing them with a refuge that is very different from the splendor of the Damascus presidential palace. At the moment, the Assad family is still living in exile under Russian protection, and Syria is starting afresh without the Assads. The family's existence in Moscow appears anything but humble. They maintain their opulent way of life even after losing their position of authority. So, what do you think of the ongoing crisis in Syria? Do you believe justice will eventually be served? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video. We hope you found it interesting. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the next video shown on your screen to catch up on your favorite celebrity stories. See you there.